Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most high-profile and controversial legal battles of the year, the trial involving Sean Diddy Combs. There's been a whirlwind of testimonies, strategic moves by both the prosecution and defense, and an overall courtroom atmosphere that's as charged as it is complex. In this episode, we're going to break it all down. We'll unpack what's happening inside the courtroom, the key witnesses, the different tactics the attorneys are using, how the jury is reacting, and what it could all mean as we inch closer to a verdict. This isn't just a celebrity scandal, it's a case that touches on deeper themes of power, justice, and public perception. And behind all the headlines, there are real legal questions that need to be answered. Let's take it from the top. Let's talk about the courtroom itself, because this isn't just about what's being said, but how it's being received. Every time you sit through a day of testimony, you start to notice the little things. The way the jury reacts to certain witnesses. The way they lean in or look away. And yes, there are clear racial dynamics at play. When Derek Ferguson, the former CFO of Combs Enterprises, testified, he made a point that hit hard for some jurors, that the company was one of the only places he'd seen where Black professionals could rise to the very top. He said that's why he joined. And when he said it, you could feel a shift in the room. A few of the jurors nodded slowly, meaningfully. Diddy nodded too. Not dramatically, just enough to say, yes, that's what I stand for. In a case this layered, every gesture counts. Jurors are human. They're watching not just the witnesses, but the defendant. They're reading between the lines. They're thinking, what kind of person is this? This is especially important because the case isn't cut and dry. The prosecution is making serious allegations: sex trafficking, bribery, extortion. But the defense is poking holes, raising doubts, bringing in contradictory evidence. The jurors are being asked to decide who they believe, who they trust, and what they think really happened. And all of that gets filtered through their own personal experiences, beliefs, and, yes, biases. Next, let's break down the legal teams. Because if you want to understand this trial, you need to understand the players. Brian Steele is one of the key defense attorneys. If that name sounds familiar, it's because he made waves in the Young Thug trial, not for what he said, but for how he said it. He's formal, precise, never over the top. He has a way of being aggressive without being offensive, calculated without being cold. He's not trying to win over the jury with drama. He's winning them over with professionalism. Then you have Nicole Westmoreland. Her style is the complete opposite. She is unrelenting, aggressive. Every cross-examination she conducts is like a chess match played at lightning speed. She doesn't waste words. She doesn't let up. Some jurors might find her style off-putting. Others might see her as a warrior for truth. But what's clear is that she never breaks character. Her consistency becomes part of her strength. This is where strategy comes in. For example, when cross-examining Mia, one of the more emotional and controversial witnesses, it was clear they chose their approach carefully. Steele went first, laying the groundwork. Then Moreland came in hard, pressing on every contradiction, every inconsistency. And there were a lot of them. Text messages praising Diddy, videos of her partying with him, public posts that don't match her testimony. Now, this doesn't automatically mean she's lying. Trauma isn't always linear, but it gives the defense a powerful tool. They're not just saying the prosecution story has holes, they're showing them. So let's talk about the witnesses. Because this is where the case really comes to life or falls apart, depending on your perspective. Derek Ferguson's testimony was huge. As the former CFO, he gave the jury a behind-the-scenes look at how things operated inside Combs Enterprises. One story in particular stood out. He said he personally made a $20,000 payment to someone who was threatening to release sex tapes involving Diddy. That's not just embarrassing, it's potentially criminal. The prosecution is framing this as extortion, possibly even obstruction. The fact that the money was eventually paid back doesn't change the fact that it happened. Then you have Mia. Her testimony is at the center of the sex trafficking charges. She told the court that Diddy took her across state lines and assaulted her. She said she was coerced, controlled, and terrified. But then the defense showed text messages that painted a very different picture. Messages where she thanked Diddy, videos where she seemed happy, posts where she said she was living her best life. Now, again, trauma is complicated. Victims often stay in touch with their abusers. They often say things that seem contradictory. But for a jury, those contradictions matter, especially when the burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. So what's going through the jury's mind? Well, a few things. First, they're trying to figure out who's credible. And credibility isn't just about what someone says. It's about how they say it. Do they seem nervous or confident? Do their emotions feel real or rehearsed? Do their stories stay consistent? Then there's the weight of the charges. These aren't small accusations. Sex trafficking, bribery, extortion, money laundering. These are big words and they carry big implications. Jurors know that convicting someone of these crimes will ruin their life. So even if they don't like Diddy, even if they think he's guilty of something, they might not be ready to convict unless they're absolutely sure. That's why the defense is leaning hard into those contradictions. They don't need to prove Diddy's innocence. They just need to plant enough doubt. At the same time, the prosecution is trying to build a pattern. They're not relying on just one witness. They're stacking stories, different people, different incidents, all pointing in the same direction. And if the jury sees that pattern, they might believe it's not a coincidence. Let's go deeper on the financial side. Because this case isn't just about personal misconduct, it's about corruption and criminal enterprise. Remember that $20,000 extortion payment? That's a federal crime. Paying hush money to protect your image isn't just shady. It's illegal, especially when it's tied to allegations of criminal activity. And there's more. Multiple witnesses have described large amounts of cash being moved around, bribes being paid, and favors being exchanged. We're talking about bags of cash, literally. One witness testified about being handed a bag filled with money to pay someone off. Another described the bookkeeping tricks used to hide these payments. It all adds up to something bigger than one celebrity misbehaving. It suggests an organized effort to silence people and cover tracks. And then there's the money laundering angle. Prosecutors are exploring whether business expenses were used to hide personal payouts. That's a major red flag. If proven, it could even lead to additional charges possibly. Outside the courtroom, this case has taken on a life of its own. Supporters and detractors are lining up on social media, on talk shows, even outside the courthouse. Some of Diddy's supporters have been vocal and disruptive. At least one person was banned from the courthouse after an outburst during a particularly sensitive piece of testimony. Others have shown up in t-shirts, chanting slogans, and posting live updates. This isn't unusual in celebrity trials, but it does affect the atmosphere. Jurors are told not to pay attention to the media, but they're not robots. They hear things. They see the crowd. And it's hard not to be influenced. Meanwhile, public opinion is divided. Some people believe Diddy is being unfairly targeted, another example of a successful black man being torn down. Others think this is finally a moment of accountability, a reckoning long overdue. The media is split too. Some outlets are reporting the facts. Others are editorializing, some are digging up old rumors. Others are trying to stay focused on the actual evidence. It's a circus, but inside the courtroom, the stakes are deadly serious. So where does the case go from here? Well, the prosecution still has more witnesses to call. They're expected to bring in financial experts, investigators, and possibly even more alleged victims. The goal is to tie everything together to show a pattern of behavior that's criminal, not just immoral. The defense will keep doing what they've been doing, attacking credibility, highlighting inconsistencies, and painting Diddy as the victim of a smear campaign. They'll likely call their own witnesses, character witnesses, maybe even forensic experts to try and rebut the charges. Then it all goes to the jury. And that's when the real suspense begins. Will they see a pattern of abuse, coercion, and corruption? Or will they see a lot of smoke but no fire? This trial is about more than just Sean Combs. It's about how we deal with power, fame, race, money, and justice in America. It's about what we expect from our legal system and whether it can handle cases this complicated. Over the coming weeks, we'll continue to cover every major development, so stay tuned. Because whatever the outcome, this case is going to make history. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Until then, take care.